when you're having a baby, there's a lot on your mind. At Northwell's Staten Island University Hospital, you can rest easy with our reimagined labor and delivery experience. Our new Grapuso Women and Newborn Center provides private suites, overnight accommodations for a loved one, and a top-level NICU, all powered by the team that cares for the most moms and babies in New York. It's care made for Staten Island and made for you. Visit northwell.edu/newbaby. Staten Island University Hospital. Raise health.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. You are entering the Stone Zone. Incredibly, the Department of Justice and the FBI have announced that the deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein never engaged in child sex trafficking, had no client list of associates who he was blackmailing or providing services for, and that no evidence exists that Epstein killed himself. I find this shocking in view of the fact that on July 8th, 2019, in the Southern District of New York, Epstein was charged with sex trafficking conspiracy, specifically accused of conspiring to commit sex trafficking of minors. The government said the conspiracy allegedly began in at least 2002 and continued through at least 2005. And he was accused of working with others, including employees, to recruit, groom, and traffic underage girls for sex acts. He was also charged with sex trafficking of minors. In this case, he was charged with sex trafficking of minors for allegedly coercing underage to engage in sex acts. The indictment details that dozens of minor victims, some as young as 14 years old, were abused at Epstein's home in Manhattan and Palm Beach. He allegedly paid the girls for sex and often encouraged them to bring other underage girls, creating a cycle of recruitment. Key details from his New York indictment: the charges carried a maximum sentence of 45 years if convicted on both counts. So if he was accused of sex trafficking, trafficking to whom? Now, the feds also released hours of alleged footage outside of Epstein's jail cell that supposedly shows that nobody suspicious was near the cell before Epstein killed himself. Previously, this camera footage was widely reported to have been damaged and inaccessible. I watched the video 4 times. It didn't really show me anything at all. We do know that the respected pathologist Michael Baden, the longtime New York medical examiner, examined Epstein's body and said that the injuries he sustained were not consistent with him hanging himself, that there were 4 broken bones in his neck that were inconsistent with hanging. Baden pointed out that he himself had performed autopsies in over 1,000 hanging cases. And of course, the criminal defense attorney David Schoen was right here in the Stone Zone only weeks ago, saying that he agreed to represent Epstein in his upcoming trial on the Thursday before the Saturday that Epstein died, and that they had agreed on a very substantial retainer. So it is very hard now to square what we have been told with what we already know. The announcements from the FBI and the DOJ seem to directly contradict a statement made by Attorney General Pam Bondi. Bondi told Fox News earlier this year that the Epstein client list had been sitting on her desk waiting for review as part of a directive from President Trump. Now, that list supposedly does not exist. How very odd, to put it mildly. Interestingly enough, the website Gateway Pundit made a motion in court to unseal the Epstein client list, and that legal action suggests that the list does exist. In July of 2022, the Gateway Pundit's attorneys filed a motion to intervene in the lawsuit of Giuffre versus Maxwell. Virginia Roberts Giuffre was suing Ghislaine Maxwell, who was essentially Epstein's pimp, demanding that the court unseal all records to identify Epstein's elite pedophile network. Then, 1 month after that legal action was filed, a mysterious John Doe appeared to file an objection to the release of the list. The court sided with this anonymous plaintiff, and the Epstein list remains sealed and suppressed as a result. Now, almost 3 years later, we're being told the list never existed. Well, if the list never existed, why did a judge rule that it should not be unsealed? I was one of the first people in the country to report on the Epstein case in my book, The Clintons' War on Women, which I published in 2015. The longest chapter in the book is about Jeffrey Epstein, and it details not only the many of the elites who visited his island. I'm sorry, but the Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell was not visiting Epstein's island for the weather, nor was former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, nor was former President Bill Clinton. In February, a group of pro-Trump social media influencers received binders that said Epstein Files Phase 1 and posed for photos outside the White House. Ultimately, those binders contained little, if any, information that had already not been made public. In fact, everything in those binders was reported in my book in 2015. It's extremely difficult to believe that there is no more pertinent information about the Epstein case that needs to be released to the public. This reeks of the same kind of deep state cover-up that President Trump was elected to thwart. I have a very high regard for FBI Director Kash Patel and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, but I believe that Patel is telling the truth when he says that they have no evidence. That's because I believe that the DVDs and the hard drives that we can physically see with our own eyes being removed from Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan residence, the single most expensive single-family residence in Manhattan, by the way, his ranch in New Mexico, his exclusive island in the Caribbean, and from his Paris apartment have disappeared. They disappeared because they were destroyed. They were destroyed by the previous regime of the FBI. That would be Christopher Wray. They were destroyed because Epstein was catering to an elite of extremely powerful people. And now what we have is a cover-up. I'm calling on the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to square her comments that the material was on her desk with what the FBI and the government have announced today. Meanwhile, the Democrats are revealing their mid-term strategy after the passage of the big, beautiful bill. The Democrats are very clear. Their strategy centers around scaremongering about Medicaid and the loss of health care. Because of the more conservative provisions in the big, beautiful bill resulted in a tightening of work restrictions, i.e., deadbeats will no longer be subsidized by the taxpayers, and due to the explicit banning of payments to illegal immigrants who have been illegally and improperly receiving Medicaid, the Democrats are creating a narrative that evil Republicans are gutting health care for the poor to give tax cuts to the rich. It's baloney. A story published in The Hill this morning titled Medicaid Cuts Could Define Midterms gives away part of the Democrats' plot. Democrats are creating this false narrative that Republicans are playing political games with American lives. These, of course, are the same people who said that the big, beautiful bill did not eliminate the taxes on Social Security, when in fact it does eliminate the taxes on Social Security for 88% of those currently receiving Social Security benefits. This is the same tactic Democrats use every 2 or 4 years. The other part of the Democrat strategy is also clear. It would be the rise of a new third party, the so-called America Party, which frankly would serve only to divide the more conservative voters and could be the only path that allows the Marxist Democrats to return to power. Now, I have a high regard and a great deal of respect for Elon Musk because what he has done for free speech and for having the courage, after he bought Twitter and turned it into X, to release all the documentation that proves that Twitter executives were working hand in glove with government officials in the intelligence agencies to censor free speech, and that anyone who talked about the legitimacy or the integrity of the 2020 election, anyone who talked about the efficiency, effectiveness, and safety of the COVID-19 vaccination, or anyone who questioned whether Hunter Biden's laptop contents, which detailed massive corruption, was real, would be censored, would be shut down, would be deplatformed. I know I was one of the earliest people deplatformed by this regime. I also respect what Elon Musk has done in terms of uncovering not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse in federal spending. But I've seen this movie before. It is the Reform Party of Ross Perot, another billionaire, who cost Republicans the White House and allowed Bill Clinton, a minority president, to be elected. In fact, Bill Clinton never got a majority of the vote in either of the two elections he ran in because of the activities and candidacy of Ross Perot as the Reform Party candidate. Frankly, I would prefer to see Elon Musk go into the Republican primaries and support conservative challengers to the rhinos, far too many of whom are currently in the Republican caucuses, and to a great extent, I think, tying President Donald Trump's hands in terms of greater reform. The only thing a new party can do is split the votes of sane people and hand power back to the Democrats. We're talking about people like AOC, people like Zoran Mamdani, the new face of their party. People like Bernie Sanders, that old blowhard, he's still around. Bernie used to criticize millionaires and billionaires. Now he just criticizes millionaires. That's because Bernie and his wife skimmed millions of dollars in media placement fees from Bernie's two presidential campaigns. Now, while that is not illegal, it is also not ever disclosed to Bernie's donors. See, Bernie likes socialism for thee, but not for Comrade Bernie. That's why he's driving a top-of-the-line Mercedes and now has 3 vacation homes. He is a socialist who believes in capitalism and free enterprise for himself and his wife. This Medicaid fugazi that they're going to try is obviously a clear part of their strategy. Washington State Democrat Congresswoman Suzanne DelBene, who chairs the Democrat Congressional Campaign Committee, said, let's be clear, vulnerable Republicans have admitted time and time again that they know their bill would obliterate access to health care, raise costs, cut jobs, threaten rural hospitals, and lead to families going hungry, but they voted to pass it anyway. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lies in one sentence. Pretty good. This is a familiar narrative, but one that can be effective if Republicans are not vigilant. A strong majority of Americans support work requirements for Medicaid recipients, and an overwhelming majority of Americans support removing access to Medicaid payments for illegal immigrants. But if the public is deluged with gut-wrenching and fabricated stories from Democrats, they might be swayed to vote against their own best interests. Republicans must be ready, in my opinion, not only to counter that message, but they must also go on the offense and hit Democrats where it hurts. The Republicans should remember one of my rules. You can find it in my book, Stone's Rules. Attack, attack, attack. Never defend. Republicans cannot be weak and let the Democrats put them on their heels. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. 77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. Thanks to the persistence and hard work of Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, the CIA has finally made the not-so-stunning admission that one of their psychological warfare specialists was manipulating Lee Harvey Oswald shortly before Oswald allegedly assassinated President John F. Kennedy. Only through the hard work of Luna and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, the CIA was forced to release a memo dated January 17, 1963, which shows that CIA officer George Joanides created an alias and a phony driver's license under the name Howard Gebler. This contradicts decades of CIA's claims that they had no previous knowledge of Oswald and that Joanides was in fact Howard. Under this alias, Joanides worked with anti-communist activists called the Cuban Student Directorate. The CIA has long denied that they set this front up, which now is also proven to be a lie. Joanides was actually served as the deputy chief of the CIA's Miami branch, where he was a specialist in psychological warfare. So Joanides' anti-communist front had significant contact with Oswald, and its activists set up the public scuffle where Oswald was seen handing out pro-Castro literature on a street in New Orleans prior to a debate on a local TV station. By the way, along with Oswald handing out the pro-Castro literature was Rafael Angel Cruz. He's the father of Senator Ted Cruz. When I raised this during the 2016 election, I was challenged, but folks, it's in the Warren Commission report. And Judith Very Baker, who was Oswald's mistress, has confirmed that Rafael Cruz, Ted Cruz's father, was in Lee Harvey Oswald's crew. After JFK was killed, Joanides then was assigned to mislead the House Select Committee on Assassinations and prevented any real investigation into Kennedy's assassination taking place in the late 70s. We're breaking it all down. You're in the Stone Zone with me, Roger Stone, and don't go away because we've got more. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Grandpa's here!
Hank's always helping out, Grandpa style. Now he's treating his prostate cancer with help from Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. You're entering the Stone Zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Well, former President George W. Bush is up to his old tricks, propping up from hibernation President Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, along with Barack Hussein Obama, in a new video to lionize disgraced federal bureaucrats. Bush recently appeared in a video with Obama and the pretentious U2 singer, whining about the cuts to USAID. Apparently, the fact that the U.S. will be funding drag queen shows in Ecuador or condoms for the Taliban has George W. very upset. Gutting USAID is a travesty and a tragedy, Obama said, because it's some of the most important work happening anywhere in the world. Bush recorded a message sent to former USAID workers who now find themselves on the unemployment line. You've showed the great strength of America through your work, and that is your good heart, Bush said. It is in our national interest that 25 million people who would have died now live. I think so, and so do you. Those numbers, of course, are complete hogwash. But what numbers are not hogwash are the millions who died in the war of Iraq, accurately called by President Trump as the greatest single mistake in U.S. history. This campaign of war was waged by the Bush administration, with key officials repeatedly lying to the public to garner support for the war. That the Iraqis had weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell said they had yellow cake uranium with which to make nuclear bombs. Dick Cheney, the vice president, told us that they were deeply involved in the attack on America on 9/11. Those were all lies to move us to war. Thousands of Americans and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis gave their lives in that fake war. There's blood on the hands of George W. Bush and the neocons. All of the flowery PR campaigns in the world will not whitewash Bush's legacy, which is now all but forgotten in the modern Republican Party. Trump has destroyed Bushism in the party and replaced it with the Make America Great ethos, and God bless him for doing that. Meanwhile, pressure mounts for Fed Chairman Jerome Powell to resign. The Federal Reserve Chairman is under massive pressure from the Trump administration to resign as his tight Federal Reserve monetary policies holding back America's national economy. Powell has made it clear that he's holding back interest rates, keeping them at an artificially high rates between 4.25% to 4.5% for political reasons. He wants to punish the American public because of Donald Trump's America First trade policy of slapping tariffs on countries that have been taking advantage of one-sided trade deals for years. The point of fact is, of course, that both the inflation rate today and the unemployment rate today are lower than when the Federal Reserve last cut interest rates in an effort to try to benefit Joe Biden's reelection. We were on hold when we saw the size of tariffs and essentially all inflation forecasts for the United States go up materially as a consequence of the tariffs, Powell said last week during an appearance at the European Central Bank Forum. What Powell is doing here is deliberately holding the economy hostage, manipulating Fed policy in a vain attempt to hold back the coming Trump economic boom. Trump is not fooled, and he's publicly said that Powell must go. Additionally, Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte has called on Powell to be investigated for potentially lying during testimony before the U.S. Senate about his mismanagement of funds. You see, Powell said that a $2.5 billion renovation to the palatial headquarters of the Federal Reserve does not include private dining rooms for the Fed governors, private elevators for the Fed governors, new marble, or a roof garden with a masterful view of the Washington skyline. The problem is that the plan approved by the Fed and the Congress includes all of those things. So the American people can't get an interest rate cut, but Jerome Powell is getting a $2.5 billion upgrade on his headquarters. Does that sound right to you? Powell is the latest in a long line of political hacks who've lorded it over the Fed. The Fed has failed at its mandate and only operated at the behest of the big banks. It really would be best if Powell were sacked with the entire institution of the Federal Reserve being flushed along with them. If Powell refuses to resign and Republicans gain seats in the 2026 election, I think it is time to completely and totally repeal the Federal Reserve Act. In the meantime, shocking news, the latest FBI data compiled from 2023 shows that only 58% of murder cases that happen in the United States are being solved. That means that roughly half the people who commit murders in this country are actually able to get away with the crime. This lags far behind other developed nations who are able to solve 70, 80, or even 90% of the murders in their countries. For additional crimes, the statistics are actually worse. Take car thefts, for example. Only 8% of those guilty are being apprehended for that property theft crime. Criminologist Brian Frost responded to the news saying it's a vicious cycle. When the bad guys see that the police are not there to deter crime and catch criminals, they remain on the streets to do more bad stuff, and the rest of the community is less deterred from crime. They think, why not? I'm not going to get caught. I might as well do it. It's really just common sense. When potential criminals know the potentiality for consequences is greatly diminished, they'll be more likely to commit more crimes. When police are hamstrung and a lack of resources are given to them to properly investigate and stuff out crimes, lawlessness is what arises. When the Black Lives Matter movement ransacked entire cities and was cheered on by the political establishment, it sent a message to criminals nationwide that the entire country was fair game. Thank God for brave individuals like Mark and Patricia McCluskey. Remember them? They were the couple that defended their home against the mob. Or Kyle Rittenhouse, who bravely exercised his Second Amendment rights against the mob to defend himself, showing that the people are never powerless against rampant thuggery. But nevertheless, the country is careening off the cliff towards anarcho-tyranny. Police are being squeezed nationwide, particularly in big cities where liberal demagogues have made them the bad guys. Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat nominee for mayor, says that violence is a construct. He wants to defund the police and open the doors at Rikers Island. Think how that will impact New York City. Fewer individuals, of course, want to be police officers, which only adds to the strain of the officers who do remain on the job. This is being perpetrated as part of a deliberate globalist plan to destabilize society, weaken the rule of law, and bring us closest to totalitarian socialism. There is no easy answer to reverse this cultural downslide, but one thing is for sure. We must back the blue and stand with them as they fight in the front lines to preserve what's left of our ailing civilization. Meanwhile, news that Republican Congressman Mark Green of Tennessee has announced that he will be resigning from his position, abruptly leaving his position and shrinking the Republican majority. Now, this is significant because today Republicans only have a 3-seat hold on the House. Green wrote in an X post, "It is with a heavy heart that I say farewell to my constituents across Tennessee's 7th District. Thank you. The trust you put in me is humbling. I will look back fondly on my years of serving as your voice in Washington." Green claims he will be leaving the position to pursue a patriotic business opportunity. He said, "While I cannot give details here, I'll be doing something specifically designed to help America compete against the Chinese Communist Party, but this time in the private sector." Now, Green has served in Congress since 2018, and he will be departing from office almost immediately. I can't tell you whether he's being honest that he's leaving Congress for bigger and better things, or if he was confronted by advising information, ultimatum to split or be publicly humiliated. And I shouldn't speculate, and I won't. But it's not like a scenario that sorted would ever, never take place in Washington, D.C. The Republican majority has been contracting since Trump's election. Congressman Mike Waltz of Florida was appointed National Security Advisor. He left his seat. Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, a never-Trumper liberal, will be stepping down at the end of his term, making that seat more vulnerable to be overtaken by a Democrat. As of today, there are actually 219 elected Republicans in comparison to 212 elected Democrats serving in Congress. I guess the Republican majority is slightly larger than I had said. But the Uniparty wants the margin to be as narrow as possible. You see, that makes it easy for their bought and paid for hacks in Congress to play musical chairs with their votes, taking turns voting against the Trump agenda in order to hold up America's first legislative priorities. I think you can expect more chicanery in the months to come to set up roadblocks heading into the midterms, as many sleeper cells still exist within the Republican fold working to undermine the MAGA agenda. Meanwhile, no surprise here, 15 Democrats, including former county party chairman and state house candidate and several city council members, are being charged for allegedly participating in an illicit ballot harvesting scheme in the state of Texas. Former Purcell Mayor Petra Davina Trevino, former Dilley Mayor Mary Ann Obregon, former House candidate Cecilia Castellano, and Precinct 3 Frio County Commissioner Raul Canceros III are among those charged on different counts of ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting, if you're not familiar with it, is a term that refers to the collecting of completed absentee ballots from voters and delivering them to polling places or elected officials. This has been a method used by Democrats who essentially go to nursing homes, old folks' homes, and help people fill out their ballots so they can turn around and essentially stuff the ballot box and win elections by shady means. Many states, including Texas and Florida, have outlawed such activities. They realize that the Democrats go to these vulnerable areas, just like nursing homes, to up their numbers through subterfuge. In some states, ballot harvesting has been made legal because of reforms passed by the Democrats. But in the state of Texas, the practice is still illegal because of the possibility for fraud that it opens up. Democrats have messed around and found out that the state of Texas does not take these antics lightly. The criminal probe also showed the gaslighting and propaganda from the fake news media on this issue and the issue of election fraud following the 2020 election. And we know that President Donald Trump has said publicly that he is seriously considering the appointment of a special prosecutor to examine the 2020 election. We were told by the fake news media that everything regarding the 2020 election was on the up and up. And if you questioned that, you were either a lunatic, a conspiracy theorist, or a criminal. Yet more and more evidence of irregularities and anomalies and outright fraud regarding the 2020 election has surfaced. So I support the appointment of a special prosecutor to look into the 2020 election, and I have exactly the right person for the job. Eagle Ed Martin, who the Senate would not confirm as President Trump's U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, now working as an Assistant Attorney General on weaponization, would be perfect to look into the 2020 election, give him subpoena power, and let's examine that election once and for all. If you're just tuning in, I'm Roger Stone. You're in the Stone Zone, and you're going to want to stay right here in the zone.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
With EA Sports College Football 26, you can rise from high school recruit to Heisman legend or cement your legacy as a coach by leading your program to glory. Pre-order the deluxe edition of the game today as part of the MVP bundle at go.ea.com/MVP-bundle to start playing 3 days early and more. EA Sports College Football 26 is rated E for everyone. Includes in-game purchases, including random items.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. Late last week, CIA Director John Ratcliffe released a special report which proved that Obama-era officials were complicit in a conspiracy to frame President Donald Trump as a Russian agent. This is widely known as the Russian collusion hoax. Ratcliffe said that what his new report showed about Russiagate was that Obama, FBI Director James Comey, National Security Advisor James Clapper, and above all, CIA Director John Brennan decided, to use his words, we're going to screw Trump. We're going to create this and put the imprimatur of an intelligence community assessment on it in a way that nobody can question it. They stamped it as Russian collusion, and then they classified it so no one could examine it. Ratcliffe specifically blasted the CIA and the FBI's high confidence assessment that Russian President Vladimir Putin aspired for Trump to achieve victory of Hillary Clinton, given the fact that Hillary Clinton had given the Russians 80% control of America's uranium production. I don't think that was true. Ratcliffe determined that the decision by agency heads to include the so-called Steele dossier in the Intelligence Committee assessment given to President Barack Obama ran counter to the fundamental tradecraft principles and undermined the credibility of key judgments. Brennan knew that the so-called Steele dossier was a fabrication. He even knew that it was paid for by Hillary Clinton, even though she reported it on her campaign finance forms as legal fees, for which she was caught and later heavily fined. Andrew Weissman, the most corrupt prosecutor in U.S. history, the de facto head of the Mueller investigation, knew from his time as general counsel of the FBI that the Steele dossier, a report that alleged that President Donald Trump had dallied with prostitutes in Russia when visiting as a private businessman, was a complete and total fabrication and his fraud. But Ratcliffe specifically called out Brennan, saying that Brennan insisted that the report be included in the Intelligence Committee assessment being presented to Obama. Now, this is not the first time this has been reported. Lee Smith, who's joined us many times here in the Stone Zone, has reported this in his writing. But it lays out again the fact that the Russian collusion hoax is the greatest single dirty trick in American political history. It is an incredible abuse of power in which the full authority of the U.S. government was used in an illicit effort to take down a duly elected president. The report released by Ratcliffe showed that Brennan was told by two experienced CIA analysts that the Steele dossier was flawed, that it should not be taken seriously, but he ignored their objections because he wanted to push the Russian collusion narrative, even at the expense of the intelligence community's reputation. Now that Ratcliffe's report has been released, the time is well past for indictments and trials for those who engaged in what is nothing less than treason. My good friend General Michael Flynn published a list the other day of all of those who should be criminally charged. I actually took his list and had to add a few names. Either we have a one-tiered criminal justice system, which all people are treated equally, or there are different levels of crime, or I should say a two-tiered system. I was charged with lying to Congress, even though no misstatement I made to Congress was either relevant, material, or hid any underlying crime. But Comey, Brennan, Hillary, McCabe, Rosenstein, they all lied to Congress, and they lied to cover up the most massive dirty trick, abuse of power, and crime in American political history. My question is a simple one. Attorney General Pam Bondi, when are these people being prosecuted? That's it for me today on the Stone Zone. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.